Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. There we go. So, Krishna says in the Gita, what is it? That he's the best of all the cheaters, right? If you're looking for a real pakka cheater, Krishna is the most pakka. He's, what do they call? He's pakka chor, right? He's the best thief if he wants to take something away. Srila Prabhupada tells, I think that his father used to tell him, right? That if God has a form with 10 arms, and if he wants to take everything, how can you stop him? And if he wants to give you, how can you say no, right? Because he's the Supreme Lord. So if he wants to cheat, he's the best cheater. He does it in the best way. So here Mohini Murti is saying, my dear demons, first let me extract one promise from you, right? Whatever I do, honest or dishonest, sadhu or asadhu. So that should have been a bit of a hint, right? That don't trust what's coming. But because they were so enamored by her beauty, we're going to hear, later they say, oh, whatever you want, right? So, and of course, ultimately, when Krishna does cheat us, he does it for a good purpose. In the Bhagavatam, there is a purport where Srila Prabhupada talks about transcendental cheating. Right? He talks about how he was cheated out of his grihastha life and tricked into taking sannyas. But then he says that this was the great benediction of my Guru Maharaj, right? That he benedicted me in this way. But he talks about, and he says that there's no loss. Whoa! There's no loss. It's okay. There's no loss for anyone in such transcendental cheating. So similarly here, thank you, there's no loss if you get cheated by Mohini Murti. Now we have to be a little careful about this. In the earlier days of ISKCON, we would take this to a bit of an extreme sometimes. Right? Because there's also this saying, by hook or by crook. We would sometimes say, by hook or by crook, distribute the book. So in the general people's eyes, we should be seen as very dharmic, as very honest, right? Does anyone know that verse? In the 18th chapter of the Gita, where Krishna talks about the qualities of a brahmana? Very good. We have a scholar. Samadhamma tatha sacham, right? That Krishna says they should have their control of their mind, control of their senses, samo, dhamma, austerity, so clean, etc. These are the qualities. So in general, we should be so honest. Right? And part of that honesty is, of course, there's that saying. What is that saying? Is it in Hindi? You speak the truth, but when it's palatable. Satyam? Right. So generally, we speak the truth when it's palatable, right? When it's nice, right? We should speak the truth, but when it's nice. There is one exception to that. That exception is when we're preaching the Bhagavad Gita, when we're preaching Krishna's message. It's actually very kind when someone's about to walk over a cliff to yell at them and pull them back. So sometimes we also have the duty, it may not be so palatable to say Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanu Darshanam, right? To say that, my dear sir, my dear ma'am, the realities of life are birth, death, disease, old age. and you kindly take to Krishna consciousness. So that's also palatable ultimately, because it's saving someone from a very bad experience. So, but in general, especially amongst Vaishnavas, we should speak very sweetly. Every exchange with another devotee, we could think like this. How can I make sure that every exchange I have with another devotee is uplifting, is kind-hearted, is compassionate would be more for Jiva Doya, but is in the mood of Vaishnava Seva. And then when I meet a non-devotee, every exchange is Jiva Doya, is compassionate. It's trying to help that soul come even this much closer to Krishna. Every exchange, that's real control of the mind. To be so Krishna conscious, to be so aware that with every exchange, it's uplifting. Every exchange. This is, so what is it? The Jiva Doya, Vaishnava Seva. What's the third one? Namruchi. Actually, the other two, to a large extent, lead to Namruchi. When we, what is that verse in the second chapter of the first canto? About how when you serve a devotee, you get a taste for the holy name. It's just before Shrunvata Svatakata Krishna, before that. You know? Yeah. Sushusho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kataruchi Sanmahat Sevaya. It's too early in the morning to remember verses. Yes, but serving a Vaishnava is a great service, and what is one of the results of that is one gets ruchi, one gets a taste for the holy name. So here, Mohini Murti, one thing that's also interesting here is that she was smiling. So it brings back remembering that Krishna was also smiling in the Bhagavad Gita, right? He starts smiling a little bit just before he starts his preaching to Arjuna, right? And Prabhupada writes there that one reason that he's smiling is that his friend has decided to take shelter of him and become his disciple, right? Sishyasteham sarimam tvam prapanam, right? So here the smiling is a little different. Maybe you might consider it a little different. Although, how can I read the mind of the Lord? But here, Mohini Murti is being a little tricky and smiling as she's tricking the demons. So in general, we can also learn a lesson. If someone comes up to you and says, Prabhu, I want to ask a benediction of you, a favor of you, but before I ask it, I want you to accept it, whatever it is. So in general, we should be a little careful to make such a promise before we find out what it is. The demons probably would have liked to have taken back their vow, because, of course, ultimately it worked out spiritually. But first, Mohini Murti says, "You promise me that whatever I ask of you, you'll accept." And of course, what do they say? Yes, they say yes. Why? Because they're a little bewildered, right? They're really bewildered, right? And when the Supreme Lord comes in the form of the opposite sex, totally bewildered. But we don't need to be bewildered by the Lord. We can be bewildered in a second by the form of the opposite sex. My mind is just, not working very well today, but In the 5th canto, that famous verse about the hard knot. What is that verse? Pumsastriyamiti nibhava metam tayoraho hridaya grantima. Right? This hridaya grantim, this hard, this tight knot in the heart, created by our attraction to the opposite sex. It's a very hard knot. And it affects us even as we're making our attempts to become devotees. There's in the Madhurya Kadamini, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur talks about the different, I think it's 6 in number, the different aspects that stop us from being, that keep us in anishtita sadhana bhakti, that keep us in unsteady devotional service. And one of them is actually quoting from the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Hridaya Durbhalyam. Right? It's called weakness of heart. You ever have that experience? You want to go, you want to chant attentively, you want to serve enthusiastically, but it's just like, maybe I'll take rest first. Right? It's just, you know what the right thing is to do, right? But Hridaya Durbhalyam, it's just like, ugh. And often this is created by, another one of those 6 is asat trishna. Right? What does asat mean? Asat. Not truth, or temporary, right? And trishna means a thirst. So to have a thirst for the temporary. That combination of asat trishna and hridaya durbhalyam, it keeps us from performing really steady, enthusiastic devotional service. So then the next question is, how do you overcome asat trishna and hridaya durbhalyam and these other unsteady devotional service? Any thoughts? This is not just, I'm asking you a question, not just rhetorically. How do you overcome? Yeah, well, that's one thing, yes. Mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimuktes. Right? What is the next line? Tamo dwaram yoshita sangi sangam. So you have a choice. It's like there's a fork in the road. And if you, mahat sevam dwaram ahur vimuktes, when you serve devotees, then mahat sevam dwaram ahur, the gate to the spiritual world opens up. And the gate to hell, right? Tamo dwaram yoshita sangisam, again, goes to those of us who remain attracted to this material world and relationships in this material world. So yes, by association of devotees. So by serving devotees, as you said, and also by associating with devotees. So when Krishna consciousness is caught as much as it's taught. You follow that? Just by associating with the devotee, associating with someone like Yadubar Prabhu, and you just see the way they perform their bhakti, and you become inspired by that example. You just see by the choices that they make, the way they chant Hare Krishna, the way they look at the deities, the way that they're so careful not to offend devotees. And you get inspiration by that association. Right? There's a saying in Portuguese. I doubt there's anyone who speaks Portuguese. Mantra Prabhu, you speak Portuguese? No? There's a saying, translated in English, is that tell me who you associate with, and I'll tell you who you are. Right? I think it's also, is it Hiranyakashipu or Kamsa who says that we're like a crystal. Association is like a crystal. Is that Hiranyakashipu? And that if you put it on something brown, then the crystal looks brown. If you put it on something rose-colored, then it looks rose, right? It takes on the qualities of whatever you put the crystal next to. So we're also like that. Who we associate with very much affects who we become. So the function of the intelligence has a number of functions, but one of the most important functions of the intelligence is choosing our association. Because we're so affected by that. In one sense, you could say we're kind of weak. We're the tatastha shakti. So we're so affected by our association. Right? Therefore, we're warned in the Shastra, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, asat sangatyag, e Vaishnavachar. And again, talking about the opposite, what is it? Sri Sangi Eka Sadhu Krishna Abhakta Ar. Right? So, and then also, Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastra Hoy, Lava Matra Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Siddhi Hoy. You get all siddhis, all perfections, through association. So, association is so important to our devotional service. And of course, Arjuna had the best association, right? He said that, now I am your disciple, the soul surrendered unto you, please instruct me. And then Krishna, he smiles, and then he begins actually with a bit of chastisement. Asocha navasocha stvang pragyavaram subhasa. He starts saying, well, you're speaking learned words, right? But you're in Maya, Arjuna. It sounds very nice, but it's not based on the soul. And then he goes on to explain the entire Bhagavad Gita. And by his association, Arjuna attains Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada wrote a letter one time saying that, I really liked this, loved this letter so much, because he said that the association that Arjuna had, right? He said the association that Arjuna had is available to all of us 5,000 years later. Right? If you read Krishna's words in the Bhagavad Gita, he said it's just as good as Arjuna getting Krishna's association directly. He said it is direct association reading the Bhagavad Gita, and especially, of course, reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, Srila Prabhupada, transparent translation and commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So, again, association. We associate with the devotees, then we read the Bhagavad Gita. Or in the end of the 6th chapter or 5th chapter of the 1st canto, Srila Prabhupada says, we thank Narada Muni for so kindly appearing on the pages of the Bhagavatam. So he was saying that we're getting Narada Muni's direct association by hearing his instructions in the Bhagavatam. We're getting Mohini Murti's direct association. When we read the 10th canto, we're getting Brajendranadan and Krishna's association. So this is also association. Bhagavatam is also association with so many great souls, with Prahlad Maharaj, with Dhruva Maharaj. Right? We're getting so much association. So one of the secrets of devotional service is to always keep ourselves in good association. So I have no idea when class begins and ends, but can I take questions now? Till 9 o'clock. Okay, so you better have some questions.
Hare Krishna. So you spoke about association and choosing our association. Can you explain a little bit more on the parameters, or a little bit more detail in how to choose the association?
And we could also talk about how do you associate, right? So how do you associate with devotees? One of the best ways to associate with devotees is to talk with them about Krishna, right? Because they're devotees, they want to hear about Krishna. You're a devotee, you should want to hear about Krishna, and that combination is very nice. If you associate with devotees and you just, talk Gramya Katha, right, and just talk about, President Trump did this, and do anyone know President Trump? You've heard of him? Does that news arrive in India? I was with devotees recently from all over the world. They say, the news is just filled with this one guy. Anyway, we can talk about so many, so one thing is to associate with devotees like that. But of course you can't associate with devotees 24 hours a day just walking around saying, reading the Bhagavad Gita. So also finding ways to serve them is association. And just inquiring about their well-being. Right? Just like I just arrived here, and the first devotee I met is Brajahari Prabhu, and he's such a good-hearted Vaishnava, and so he says, is everything all right? Is your room okay? Did they pick you up at the airport? Whatever you need, please let us know. And he's such a good-hearted Vaishnava. So finding ways to associate. And also one really important factor is to not think that association only means with the senior devotees, like the senior devotees here. Right? It doesn't only mean that. It also means with the Prabhus, the Bhaktas, whatever, the Bhaktins. Right? Jesus Christ, he said that the way you treat the least of me, I accept as the way you treat me. So sometimes Guru Maharaj comes and we're all Guru Maharaj, Hare Krishna, and we pay dandavats and we're all humble like this. And then another Prabhu gets in the way, we go, chalo. Just like in Vrindavan. So the temple is kind of, the temple is a little different, right? Srila Prabhupada's Murti is here, right, in Vrindavan. So Vrindavan's very crowded, almost all the time, right? So a big sannyasi comes, and they're greeting the deities, and they greet Shri Shri Gaurnitai, they greet Krishna Balaram, they greet Shri Shri Radha Shyamasundar, they take Charnamrita. Then they have to get from the other side of the temple, the Charnamrita, to Prabhupada's Vyasasana in order to offer arti or to sing the kirtan. So some devotees think that it's service to their guru to totally offend all the other devotees. And they start pushing the other devotees, get out of here. They're making like a bulldozer to get out of the way so Guru Maharaj can. So, and Guru Maharaj is so embarrassed, So that's not the right mood, right? The idea that, of course, we treat senior devotees, but we should treat all the devotees with respect. One time, there was a slug. You know what a slug is? A snail? Is there a Hindi word for that? Anyway, a little animal. You have the word? Anyway, a little bug like this. But it's not a bug that flies. It goes very slowly. Right? So this is very early in ISKCON. And the devotee said, Prabhupada, he said, there's this bug here. What should we do? And Srila Prabhupada said, chant to the poor thing. Chant to the poor thing. So we're supposed to be samadarshina, right? We're supposed to not only think of human beings as our brothers and sisters, but all species, right? Sarva yonishu, Krishna says in the Gita, right? So what to speak of someone else who's taken to devotional service, right? So we may associate differently, right? When you associate with a senior, right, you associate differently than when you associate with a junior, and when you associate with a peer, it's slightly different. But in all cases, it's seva. In all cases, it's seva. It's just different distinctions according to... so this is, does anyone here, raise your hand if you've ever had trouble controlling your mind, especially during japa. Has anyone ever had that problem? Okay, just checking. I wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one. So, the mind is a challenge, right? Chanchalahi mana Krishna, Krishna says in the Gita. But actually the mind is a much easier and much weaker than the false ego. You see, what the mind does is the mind protects the false ego. We have a false conception of who we are, and then the mind's service is to reinforce that false conception. And that takes on, 8,400,000 different ways of doing that, right? But it's based on the false conception of who we think we are, right? So one of the great benedictions of serving Vaishnavas is slowly, gradually, our false conception of who we are changes. If we start thinking ourselves as a servant of Krishna and a servant of the devotees. Because as long as we think, even in a small way, Ishwaraham, Aham Bogi, Siddhaham, Balavam Sukhi, right? We think that we're the center and we should be taken care of. Then the mind just goes like wild horses in all kinds of different directions. It reinforces the false ego. But, and also, of course, they go hand in hand. When we chant, Prabhupada writes one place that chanting gradually dissolves the false ego, the false idea of who we think we are. So think about it. When you look in the mirror, who do you think you are? And we should think of ourselves as Jivera Swarupahaya Krishnera Nityadas. This word Swarup is very important, right? What is the Swarup of sugar? Sweet, right? If it's salty, it's not sugar, right? What is the Swarup of chili? Hot, right? It has to be hot or else it's not a chili. It has to be sweet, right? Or it's not sugar. So that's its swarup, that's its essence. That's what it is. So what is our swarup? Servant of Krishna. Yes, not just servant of Krishna. That's who we are. Just next time you take a sweet or you see some sugar, you think, you look at it, that's the swarup. Right? The swarup of Sandesh is to be this wonderful sweet, right, with sugar in it, right? So our swarup, who we are, is Krishna's servant. And then from that will dictate very clearly how we treat other people. How we treat other devotees. And then we're so convinced and we're so happy as being a devotee, then when we meet someone who's not a devotee, we want to give them Krishna consciousness. So much is based on, what we see when we look in the mirror. I was just reading in, I think it was either in 26 2nd Avenue or perhaps it was in Montreal. And Pradumna Prabhu, he had a practice apparently that after he put on his tilak, he would look in the mirror and he would say, Vaishnava. Vaishnava. So, very innocent. Those are the very, very early days of Krishna consciousness. But he was trying to convince himself that he was a devotee. So we should really meditate upon this verse. Jivera Swarupahaya Krishnera Nityadas. Right? That's our identity. So in one sense you could say the whole process of sadhana bhakti is the process of convincing or changing the ego from the false ego to the real ego. Other questions, comments? Yes, Maharaj. Way back there, the nice brahmachari. Serve him by sending him the microphone.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
You told to avoid asat sangha.
Yeah.
So how to avoid them? Sometimes we are forced to have association with those people. Maybe they are our close relative, like brothers or any some close relations, or in another way they are in our roommates. And sometimes even we tell Prabhu we don't want to associate with you, but still they don't. They laugh and they come. And so in such conditions, how to avoid those asat sangha?
Well, we usually say that the general principle is to not take on their qualities, and especially to not reveal your mind. Because what is that? Dadati pratigrinati guyam akyati prichati, right? So the idea is that especially in the association of devotees, we reveal our heart, we reveal our mind. We don't want to open up our hearts too much to someone who's thinks their swarup is something other than Krishna Das. Because then you open it up and then other things may go inside. But when you open up your heart to devotees, then Krishna comes inside. You know? When we're preaching, one time a devotee, because there's some place in the Shastra, I don't know if anyone knows the reference, it says when you look at the face of a non-devotee, then you should take bath in the Ganga. Something along those. In other words, it's the idea is it's talking about this asat sanga tyag, right? And so someone asked Srila Prabhupada that question. One of the book distributors in America, that Srila Prabhupada, we read this, but we're associating with non-devotees all day long. We're distributing books. And Prabhupada said, you are doing Sankirtan, so you're instead of having to take bath in the ocean, in the Ganga, you're already taking bath in the Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam, right? The ocean of transcendental bliss, because you're serving Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Other things that Prabhupada arranged for us was, of course it's easier for you because you live in India, is that he would instruct the devotees in the West who are going out preaching all day, every day, that once a year or as often as possible to come to Mayapur, to come to Vrindavan and recharge our spiritual batteries. So we also recharge our spiritual batteries morning and evening. I remember when I first became a devotee, and I'm still trying, but and I went to visit my family. I was a fanatic. And was anyone here a fanatic when you went to visit your family? So I carried the Bhagavad Gita with me everywhere. And my mother was very nice. She was very careful to cook everything vegetarian, no onions, no garlic. She really wanted, but still under the table as we were eating, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita. She must have thought I was crazy. I was so young, I was 17. But so it takes a little maturity, but when we have, anyway, it's always according to time, place, and circumstance. In general, we should be kind to our parents. In 26 2nd Avenue, when Brahmananda Prabhu and Gargamuni Prabhu, when their parents came to see them, Srila Prabhupada made them offer obeisances to their mother. Right? Of course, she's a Westerner, she didn't know how to react to that, but so we have that kind of respect. At the same time, for me, and probably for some of you, we became devotees despite the protest of our parents. Did that happen to anyone here? Anyone have your parents not so happy that you're A devotee? No? All your parents are totally happy? Anyway. So my mother wasn't happy at all. Matter of fact, she wanted to hire someone to kidnap me. But because she was Jewish, she said it was too expensive. Anyway, they wanted $10,000, which was a lot of money in those days. $10,000. But ultimately, my mother, in her later days, she moved to Vrindavan, and she left her body in Vrindavan. So all's well that ends well. So I think, Prabhu, we can, if we're honest, we can see our consciousness, if it's remaining steady or if it's starting to go down due to association. And therefore, if it's starting to go down, we should be careful. But it's very much time, place, and circumstance. As I associate with non-devotees all day long because I actually have a job. I work for President Trump, actually. I work for the federal government. And I have to be careful to have good Krishna consciousness in the morning, good Krishna consciousness in the evening, so that I'm not, overly contaminated by people who have a different worldview, a different way of seeing the world. Is that all right? Does that answer your question? Yeah? What else? Yadubarpu, Mukunda Madhava, Mahamantrapu, would you like to add? What would you like to add? Give him a microphone.
I just wanted to say that everything is perfect. So. Hare Krishna.
See, that's a Vaishnava. They're like, what does Prabhupada say? They're like bees looking for the honey instead of flies looking for the stool. Mukunda Mahamantrapu? Some other questions, comments? I mean, maybe Prashadam isn't available for 15 more minutes. So. Okay, but let me look at the verse one more time and see if there's anything else. So yes, this is, here it says that Krishna is absolute. So, I'm sure, especially I lived in India for 20 years, so I'm a little familiar, that sometimes people will say that, I prefer Lord Ram, because he was Pakka, right? He had Eka Patni Brata, but you're Krishna, right? So, he danced with the gopis and so many things. But we have to be more than convinced that Krishna is totally absolute. And one nice way to meditate and even to preach about, Krishna encouraging Yudhisthira to lie, or breaking his promise and ready to attack Bhishma, right? Or dancing with other people's wives in the middle of the night. That whenever he seemingly acted in an asadu way, you might say, it's only because he's Bhaktavatsal. Right? When he was dancing with the gopis, he's Bhaktavatsal. Right? He's serving, he's so inclined to reciprocate with the devotion of his devotees. When he's ready to attack Bhishma, he's simultaneously protecting his devotee Arjuna and satisfying Bhishma Dev, and he's willing to break his promise because Bhaktavatsal trumps, I shouldn't use that word anymore, is more important than even keeping his word. Right? So anytime it's seemingly like that, Krishna is acting, of all of his qualities, his favorite quality is Bhaktavatsal. So one time the devotee showed Srila Prabhupada a picture I think it was Radha Kunja Bihari in Detroit, but I'm not sure. Of the deities, I think, and I have Yadubar here, so I have to be careful what I say about Prabhupada's pastimes, that he'll correct me. So I'm not sure if it's the same time. One time devotees showed Srila Prabhupada a Christian tract. The Christians would print up these little 5 or 10 page, sometimes they were even cartoons, right? And they cost very little money, so they'd give them out like crazy. So there was one that was kind of putting down the devotees. Yeah. And then Prabhupada had a picture of I think it might have been Rukmini Dwarkadish in LA, but I'm not sure. And he said, anyway, I think it was Trivikram Maharaj's brother who had sent this track. And Prabhupada showed the devotees in the darshan the picture and said, anyway, we have the nicest God. That's what he said. And then another time, I think it was Radha Kunja Bihari. Kunja Bihari in Detroit, Krishna is very Tribanga, right? So he looked at the picture and he showed the devotees and he said, this is Krishna. And he said, he's very inclined to his devotees. Because when you're Tribanga, you're playing your flute, Krishna's playing, and he's very leaning over towards Srimati Radharani. So he's very inclined to his devotees. So here we see that it says that anything Krishna does is absolute. So even, and so we can understand this, of course, that any activity, any pastime he does, and often what he does with one pastime, he does many things, right? We read about that as well. So Krishna's pastimes are very palatable, and also, but we don't even look at them in a sentimental way. There's a deep, deep philosophy behind them. A deep, deep philosophy. So I always used to like the idea of philosophy in the morning and Leela at night, right? In the old days of, I don't know if we do that here in Juhu, but in the old days of Krishna consciousness, we would have hot milk and Krishna book at night. Yeah, you do that? Yeah, very nice, right? So you hear Krishna's pastimes before you take rest, and in the morning, when your brains are sharp, mine isn't, you hear philosophy. It's a nice combination. Okay, if there's nothing else, we can end. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanand.